bless my soul, what's wrong with me?
Welcome back to Where You Live with Gene and Tony. We're so glad you're with us this morning. If you're just picking up the show right now, we've got a bunch of things we're going to talk about today. We're going to begin with some of the major legislation, and I mean pretty major stuff that's going on in both Florida and Nevada. We want to talk about how that relates to some of the things that are going on here in Minnesota. And then we also have a story a little bit later on, too, that I think is really fascinating. There is a board of directors who every single one of them is up for recall on their election. And we're going to kind of dissect that whole situation because we hear from people from time to time. They just say, I don't feel like I've got any authority or any power in my homeowner association. I don't like what's going on. Mm-hmm. What can I do? We want to talk about that. Mm-hmm. And for our listeners, though, we're doing things a little bit differently. And Tony, do you want to describe what that is?
Well, sure. We are actually taping our broadcast to be aired on Sunday, which unfortunately means we can't take live calls from our listeners. Now, because many people tell us they don't want to be live on the radio, they would rather talk to our producer or leave us a message during the week. We hope it won't be too inconvenient. But we do have a hotline that you can call with your questions or comments about our show, Where You Live with Gene and Tony. And when you do that, we'll address it at the next broadcast. The phone number is not in front of me.
Oh, I've got it right here.
I hope you have it.
Yes, 952-224-2668. That's the Where You Live hotline where you can leave questions, comments on voicemail, and we will address them on next week's show. Or you can also email. A lot of people have been doing that too.
True.
My email is Gene, Gene, at ncmgi.com. And so we're happy to continue to address your concerns, your questions about anything we talked about the week before or anything that's just on your mind about living in an HOA or an apartment or a single-family home.
And we also have something else new happening this summer at the end of August.
That's
Tell us
right.
about that, Gene.
We are going to be at the Great Minnesota Get-Together, the State Fair, and it's going to be great. We're going to be there live for 2 shows, Sunday, August 28th, and Sunday, September 4th from 10 till noon. And we want you to stop by the station's booth. There's a bunch of great goodies that we're giving away, a bag of that's free that you can pick up. And during the show, we're going to be giving away thousands of dollars worth of just fun stuff, just good stuff, the good stuff.
Good stuff. We like the good stuff.
Yeah, and
so that's at the AM 1280, the Patriot booth, correct?
That's right, and I think that's over by Machinery Hill. So you want to make sure that you get over there.
Come and say hello.
Yes, or still call us too, because we'll have people that will be winners of prizes who call in the show.
All right.
Those 2 Sundays as well. Well, let's get into a little bit about just some of the details that's going on with an update with legislation in Florida and Nevada. And let's begin with Florida first.
Okay.
Tony, just this last July, Governor Rick Scott there had just signed in the latest Community Association Reform Bill. And there are some things in there that really weren't new. I mean, we talked about them last year taking place, but then you end up having some things that were probably printed out incorrectly, and that's what they call the revisor's office.
So the revisor took care of some of these items?
Yes, and sometimes you have a bill that might be addressed again, and you say, what's going on? I thought they already did that. Well, they might have made a mistake, and so they were doing some clarification. Some of that went on, but then there's some other things, too, that I think are really kind of unique. Let's deal with, I thought this one is a biggie, and that is, how about the homeowner association's ability to obtain the rental income from a unit where that landlord is not paying their association, their monthly assessment.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a good idea. We've seen that happen here in Minnesota quite a bit. People who were not able or who had to move couldn't sell their townhouse, so they put a renter in there, leave, and collect the rent every month, but perhaps some of those people, and in fact some of those people have, defaulted on their homeowner association dues.
Yeah.
They may still be paying their mortgage, so they're not in a foreclosure situation, but they've just stopped paying the homeowners association. Yeah. To me, it's if the association goes through a judgment process and gets a judgment for that money owed to them, they can then go through a garnishment procedure too and garnish income from that owner. This just kind of cuts some corners and makes it easier for the association to go directly to the source of the income, which is the renter, and pay themselves back for those unpaid
and I agree.
dues.
I kind of like that too. We don't have that here in Minnesota. I remember back when I first started doing managing homeowner associations. This is back in 87.
07?
Yes.
No, you said 87. Sorry.
Yeah, 1987, in the last century. And I remember there was, at this particular homeowner association, a landlord a guy who ended up making maybe 20, 30 of these condominium units into rental property.
Whoa.
But remember, back in the day, there used to be something that was called a fully assumable mortgage.
Okay.
Yeah, without qualifying.
Yeah.
And so because we were in kind of a recession like we are now, we had that had been a little bit earlier. They had changed things with FHA financing, and they allowed someone to pick up and assume and take over the mortgage so that someone else could get out.
Wow.
Well, this guy ended up doing it.
This is how he built his investment portfolio, was just by assuming a bunch of mortgages.
But this particular guy didn't have any he had nothing he was going to do was going to pay the association what was owed.
Oh.
He was out to keep all the money himself.
Okay.
And I remember it was a big hellacious deal.
I'm sure.
And finally to get him
30 units, that's a lot of income lost.
This would have certainly changed that.
Yep.
It is what's interesting is so that now in Florida it is clear that you can begin to take rent. I think the difference between the bill last year till this year, Tony, was last year if the associate, let's say your dues were $237 a month. If that's what was owed last year, the bill was stated such that the association could start getting $237 a month
from the rent. This
year, they can get the full rent.
Okay,
and so that is a little bit different. So that means that if it's an $800 a month rent, they get all of that to start not only taking care of this month, but also taking care of those
future months. So I'm assuming they can only collect what's owed.
Yes.
Or, you know what I mean? There's got to be a limit on that, I think.
But if there's something that's past due that goes back a little bit, yes, they would be able to collect on
now,
that.
in Minnesota, we do not have this ability.
That's right.
Right now in Minnesota. In Minnesota, the association has to take some kind of action, usually in small claims court, for unpaid assessments. Then, like I said, if they get a judgment, they can go through the garnishment process. But even then, it's easier if you know there's a renter in that property because you know where the income is. Garnishment gets difficult when you can't locate bank accounts.
That's a good point.
Or you can't locate an employer to garnish wages from. It's worth it for an association to pursue this with a rental.
And the other thing that's interesting with this, too, of course, it was also, I guess, further clarified from last year that we weren't talking just about condos, but all homeowner associations have the ability to do this. And then the thing that I thought was real interesting was there was another story about a local housing authority.
Okay, and what's a housing authority? That's usually the agency that is administering Section 8 vouchers.
Yes.
Correct? They're usually a HUD agency, so they often have renters.
Yes.
In homes.
Yeah. Do you remember reading that little bit from there was back in Florida, there was some problem with one of the local housing authority. It was the West Palm Beach Housing Authority when the homeowner association turned to them and said, we are going to need to start collecting this rent. they thought that
because
they were
the owner is in default. Yeah.
They thought that they were above that, and
The
they
housing
said,
authority didn't want to pay it.
No, they
to
didn't.
another entity. Yeah.
And that was real interesting. They found out, of course, that no, the law also applied to them equally. It wasn't just it just wasn't individuals who own property, but the housing authority had to pay as well.
I can see where that was a confusing issue, though, because the housing authority generally has a contract with the owner of the unit. So they don't want to just start paying the rent to somebody else. You know, they need to make sure they're on good legal standing to do that.
Yeah.
And apparently that was clarified.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, let's take another break. When we come back, we've got a few other things to cover. There's one that deals with the authority of an association to ban people that they know are felons from being on the board. Also, there is a law about homeowners who must be given the right to speak at board meetings. I find that interesting, and so much more, but you'll find it only here on Where You Live with Gene and Tony. We'll be back after this.